Feeling kind of dark and moody today. How are y'all? The question I have at the front of this video is I've got a fan on in the office so I can stand to be in here. I don't know if you guys can hear the fan. I can push this magic button and you absolutely will not hear the fan, but then the guitar goes away or sounds weird. If I push the button away again, the guitar comes back and sounds natural for an unplugged casino. But there might be some fan noise. So tell me, A, if you can hear the fan, if it's bothering anyone. B, am I too dark and moody? I've been watching a bunch of kind of noir stuff, and I just felt like going deliberately underexposed. Is it too dark out there? I can easily change it. I've got a really good monitor here, and you know, I'm in a relatively dark space. But you know, at a touch of a button, I can go bright and sunny and annoying. I can always go annoying. Annoying's easy. But if you think it's a little too dark, no, it's not a good time to insert ads, YouTube. Speaking of which, too dark. All right, let me go up a little bit. That's very simple to do. Let's see. 1, 2, How's that? Should still be quite a bit underexposed, according to correct. But it is true, wallpaper music. I have noticed this about you. Where's that go? Okay. How's it go? Missed the one. It's weird how you have things in your muscle memory, and then one day they're just not there. You find yourself falling off the bike. Anyway, it's not about me misremembering how to play something I've played 1,000 times, if not more. It's about you guys. So, we're happy with this level of dark and moody. What is and what should never be. That's a different one. That's a different one. Good. That was misremembered 10 years gone. It's been more than 10 years gone since I remembered how to play that damn song. Anyway, let's see what questions people might already have for us this early in the chat. And sorry if my hair's even less styled than usual. I took a shower about an hour ago, and it just decided to get puffy. You don't like changes to the changes. Where's that Yes song? Probably not the right key. Let's see. Good hello to everyone who said hello. I know that one of the great things about this group of people is that you're saying hello to each other as much as you're saying hello to me. You can't hear a thing. As of the beginning, Andy, I had the mic muted at the beginning. But now, and you can barely hear. Maybe you're talking about not hearing the fan. Maybe you're talking about hearing the guitar. It's not plugged in, so this is just there's a slight deep noise floor, nothing life threatening. Yeah, I can push that button and the noise floor goes totally away, and the voice sounds fine, but the guitar sounds alien, and I need as much help with my guitar sounds as possible. Yeah, it's been blistering hot here too. It's 85 today, and it was a little bit cooler yesterday. So we have these 2 days of niceness, but it was so ungodly hot. It was like 106 3 days ago. Of course, those were the days I was out on the porch scraping paint. Let me do a mini rant. I think some of you will relate to this mini rant. So I've got a 120-year-old house, 112-year-old house. Whatever. It's old, even older than me. And we wanted to get rid of the old cast iron, ugly, late 70s, early 80s security door because it's horrible. You know, they're just ugly, and the black was fading to gray in patches, and the plexiglass had broken, all this stuff. So I took that off, and at some point in this house's past, some genius decided rather than scrape and paint the old wood, they put up vinyl siding. I hate vinyl siding. I don't have it in the budget or my schedule to remove all the vinyl siding yet, but I did remove the vinyl cladding from around the door entryway and the side lights and the transom and all that, and some supporting posts, because I can at least get rid of that awful vinyl cladding that was supposed to be white, but it's really a gray. It's a terrible gray, and just looked horrible. So I got that off, and underneath the vinyl cladding was good wood with old paint. So I was scraping paint and sanding and using a scraper, and got it down to bare wood most places. Some places there were little patches of original oil based paint that was, in places where the wood grain was deep. And then I was able to prime it and get it all looking great. And then I painted it, all looked great. I already had the door picked out, and had the door delivered, the new door, which was a white. And I took up one piece of that hardware from the box to Sherwin-Williams and matched that white, and everything was ready to go. And then Nikki goes out of town, and I wanted to have that door installed for her today when she got back. So yesterday I went to install the door. And because of the way things work, the door arrived in a big cardboard box. I put that big cardboard box up on some 2x4s across some sawhorses. Now, important to this story, the side of the door in question has never contacted those 2x4s or those sawhorses or me until the stunning reveal. So I opened the door up, and coincidentally, the interior side was facing up, and the interior side of the door is the side that you're supposed to have up to properly install the glass and to attach all the hinges and all that stuff. So I'm doing all this stuff, and I've got the side rails. I'm able to measure, and it's all going to work. And I install, pre-drill a couple of hanging holes in the door jamb for the side rails, and I attach the side rail on the hinge side to the door, and I'm not going to have to shim. I'm thinking this is going to be so easy. Then I take it off, and I put it on there, and I'm holding it in such a way that I'm not looking at the other side of the door. I still haven't really seen the other side of the door. I'm hanging it on the hook, on the nail, and then putting another one down, and I close it, and there's this big fucking gouge in the aluminum from the factory, right beneath where the door handle is going to be. It won't be hidden by the hardware. I didn't check before I did all that work. Anyway, Lowe's is coming Monday to pick up that door, and then they've got to return that door, and then return the credit to us. Then we can buy another door. There's just no easy way to do this. I'm never going to have a front door at this rate. No project will ever be completed because of factors outside my control. Yesterday was like 80 degrees. Today's 85. When the door comes back, and I'll have to go out there and rehang the door, it'll be like 120. I just know it. Sorry for the rant, but it's been on my mind. It's one of the reasons I had to take a shower before doing this. I was out this morning on a ladder with a razor blade, scraping paint off around the windows where I'd gotten some paint deliberately on the windows. And I have a box somewhere in the house, and it's somewhere in the kitchen, of like 100 razor blades I bought on Amazon. And I've only used like 10 of them. And I cannot find that box of razor blades anywhere. My last razor blade that I had floating around here that I was using to scrape paint has gotten too dull, and I need to get another one. and I cannot find those razor blades. And I know if I go and buy another box of razor blades at Home Depot or whatever, I come home, then I'll find the other 93 that I already have. Sorry. Let's see, some amp questions. Matt Johnson again. I know some like to mod their plexis by changing the mid pot from 25K to 50K. Supposedly EVH's plexi was like this. It is. Ever tried this, and do I think it adds much to the amp? It gives you the ability to have a little bit more mids and to partially defeat the tone stack and get a little extra gain from it. And if you have, it's a linear taper pot. So if you have a stock 25K, you have 7 o'clock minimum to 5 o'clock maximum. You replace it with a 50K. Your old maximum, which was at 5 o'clock, is now at noon. So between 7 o'clock and noon, it works just like you already had it, but from noon to 10, noon to 5 o'clock, you've got all that additional mid-range and additional gain. So it's an easy thing to do. Whether you want to mod an old plexi is up to you, but if you have a reissue, certainly, or a Marshall variant, it's a very easy thing to do. I have not tried the Orange Super Crush amps. It uses JFETs in the front end. Sounds really good, especially into a tube output section. I'm impressed. Well, I will check it out, Guitar Tech. If they're using JFETs, they're probably using... Are they using JFETs or MOSFETs? Most people today are doing tube emulation in solid state using some little LND 150 MOSFETs that are really great because they behave similarly, kind of like a triode, a little bit pentodish if you get into the weeds, but they run at high voltage, which means that it's really easy to incorporate the high voltage MOSFETs with the because you already have the voltage for a tube power section. But it is possible to do it with JFETs. I just haven't played around with it. And no, I have not checked out the Orange Crush, but I will. Not Orange Crush, Orange Super Crush. Super Crush. It's a Super Crush and you've had your six. Any suggestions for a relatively flexible, lightweight, easy to transport rig, pedals or multi-effects and amp for someone who plays in different environments regularly? It depends on what your volume needs are, whether you have specific sounds that you absolutely want to nail, or whether you just need to have a wide range of appropriate sounds, usable sounds for a budget. So the best, and how are you going to hear yourself? Are you at a stage where you're using in-ears, or are you hearing yourself in a cab? If you're an in-ear user, then go get one of the Fractal Audio FM 6s or 9s, the fairly large multi-effects pedal boards, and take it everywhere, and have a couple of 1x12 powered stage monitors so everyone can hear you on stage as necessary to supplement the in-ears. If you don't have the budget for all that, because you're talking like the in-ears, you're looking at the monitor, powered monitors, you're looking at the Fractal, and the Fractal is like $1,500 or more. I would, and then it depends on how loud you need to be. You could get like a Boss Katana 100 if you like that output level, but you want more sounds. You could get the Fractal later. You could get a HX Stomp. You can get a Tonex, and then run into the power section of that 100-watt Katana, and get a lot of great stuff for a very low investment. That you could do an initial investment and make add to it and grow your rig as needs and budget allows. Let's see. Any thoughts on people making Highwatt style amps? There's the Reeves that was really good. And I'm sure some other people have done it. I just have not seen that many. I know that Mojotone has got a Highwatt model, but I've not heard it or tried it or seen it in person. Highwatts are difficult because most people think that they want a Highwatt and they've never played a real one. And when you've played a real one, and by a real one I mean a 50 watt or 100 watt, I don't mean the little shooters they got out, there's Brad's word. the little things that the Highwatt company today is making. That's just some investment banker who bought the name and is producing amps, issuing electronics with that name on it. They're really loud, almost unpleasantly, almost unusably loud on modern stages. So, hey, Dave, thanks for joining us. So, Highwatts are the kind of thing that if you really want and really need and really appreciate the Highwatt, you're also probably not going to be happy with anything less than the Highwatt or the Reeves or some other very high-end version of it. And odds are that won't be your only amp. That'll be one for your collection. So it's kind of a specialty thing. A Highwatt amp is kind of like a very expensive Swiss watch. They're fantastic things if they are actually suitable. Everyone on the forums who wants Highwatt is into Live at Leeds and Gilmore, Live at Pompeii, etc. Well, Gilmore was louder than the PA back in the day because the PA sucked. The PAs basically had vocals, a little bit of overheads on the drums, and maybe some keyboards. That's it that the PAs had. Gilmore doesn't use that whole rig today because they have PAs and he'd be deaf. Townsend certainly doesn't use the Live at Leeds rig anymore because that's one of the main reasons he went deaf. That and Keith Moon putting dynamite in his bass drum. Funny story that. But, I think Highwatts are great, but they're a specialized thing. Most people, if you were to do a company making a copy of a Highwatt, is the market. To do it well, it's going to be an expensive amp. There's going to be a really small number of people out there to buy it. So it's a very small target market. Whereas if you make another Fender, another Marshall, someone's going to buy it. Someone's going to want that. But it's so hard to do, because how do you stand out? Dave Friedman's here. I don't need to make a 50 watt or 100 watt Marshall style amp because he's already done that and he's already absorbed the cost of the R&D, and his chassis costs him $10 each, whereas mine would cost $60 each, and that all gets passed to it's hard to compete on a known thing. Now, the real question is why Marshall can't outcompete Dave, why Marshall can't build a better Marshall than Dave or John Suhr or George at Metropolis, or Greg at Germino, because Germinos, Suhrs, Friedmans, Metropolis, these are all much better Marshalls than the stuff that has the magical logo on it today, which also cost as much or more than most of the competitors. Yeah, it was a bit of exaggeration, Dave. I wish my chassis cost me $60, but you know what I mean. You can make an amp at a lower selling price than I can. And Marshall can make an amp at a lower selling price than you can, but then they've taken that to an extreme. Let's see. Hey, TD, yeah, experiment with different makes of power tubes and preamp tubes. But the thing is, there's what is fantastic in terms of, hey, this is my favorite. There's what's affordable for the clients, and there's what's reliable. So, I can't say, hey, yeah, everyone who comes in with a 60s Fender must have 60s RCA gray labeled 6L6s. It's just, or 6V6s. It's just not feasible for everyone to go to that. So then you're looking at, well, what gives an appropriate sound and is reliable? Like a JJ, sounds good, isn't reliable, becomes microphonic. And plus the JJ6V6 isn't really a 6V6. It's a smaller 6L6 in some ways. Electro Harmonics right now is having a pretty good track record with their 6V6s. That can change. It has changed. JJs used to be very reliable. Now they're less so. Electro Harmonics used to be less reliable. Now they're more so. Tube Amp Doctor, TAD, shit, absolutely crap. Can't rely on them for anything, which is a shame because they had a lot of promise when they came out. Tungsaw, now that, well, it's going to depend on Russia, but Tungsaw 5 years ago, well, I guess 6 years ago now, was very good consistently, and then were impossible to get for a while. And I've had more failures with current Tungsaw 6V6s than I had with previous Tungsaw 6V6s. And same goes for preamp tubes. Same goes for there's not one brand that I love, and there's not one tube type that I love. But I may choose this brand for their 12AT7. Might choose this brand for the 6L6. This brand for the EL34. And it's not necessarily because it's the best sounding, but because I know that if I put that in the client's amp, it's going to last 6 months to a year at the least. Typically. There's no guarantees, but there are other things where I'm like, it might last 6 weeks, it might last 60 years, but I'm betting on something closer to 6 weeks. And that's sad, but true from my experience. Hey, Lucas, thank you very much. I have not worked on the Chris Stapleton amp. As far as I know, it's built very similarly to a 62 Deluxe, but for that price range, I would go with the Suhr Ombre. It's better built than anything Fender's put out in a long time. I think the Stapleton's maybe the Princeton rather than the Deluxe, but very similar sounds. This has nothing to do with Chris Stapleton. This is Fender's production versus Suhr's production. I think for that, in that price range, you'd be happier with the Suhr. Let's see. Hey, Tom K1TL. Need info on getting those diodes connected across the rectifier tube pins. Do I have a schematic where to connect the diodes? Well, they're not diodes. They actually are, no quotes, diodes. They're diodes. I usually use a 1N4007. If you want something with higher current, there are other models out there. Models with more voltage handling. You can use a 3000. You can use a 5 amp, whatever. Usually 1N4007s are fine. It's really simple. You don't need a schematic for it. The HT secondaries of a power transformer on a GZ34, 5AR4, or 5U4GB connect to pins 4 and 6 on the tube. So 4 and 6 are where the HT wires connect on one of those rectifier tubes. And then there's no polarity to that AC, so it doesn't matter which red wire goes where, as long as you're talking about the red wires, not the typically yellow wires. So one red wire going to pin 4, one red wire going to pin 6. Or if you want to use some diodes to supplement the rectification and to give the tube some protection, you put the wires, instead of going to pin 4, you put on the wire to pin 3 or to pin 5, and then instead of 6, you go to 5 or 7. Anyway, one off in either direction from the target, the true target, which would be 4 and 6. Then you put the diode from, say you connect one red wire to pin 3, you put a diode going from 3 to 4 with anode band at pin 4. And then instead of going to pin 6, you run the red wire to pin 7 and the diode there from pin 7 to pin 6 with the anode at pin 6. That means the voltage going to pins 4 and 6 is forward voltage, which is positive, which is what we want. And there you go, you're done. As to which diodes you want to use, 4007s have never failed for me. There are theoretically better ones you can use. It almost doesn't matter in this case. But that's the answer. No schematic, really. You just have to conceptualize, I want forward voltage, and pins 3, 5, and 7 on a GZ34, 5AR4, 5U4GB are not used internally. There's not even a pin on the tube there. They're just free pins on the socket. So you just use those as little standoffs. Have you ever worked with a Lowe's installer, Dustin? I'm going to do it myself, but it is frustrating to have to do things twice. Hey, man, I will say that the Lowe's installment service did me a solid in one way, is that when we started this bathroom remodel and I removed the wall sconces in there, because we initially thought we were just going to strip the wallpaper before we realized I'd take out the walls. And then after we got the wallpaper out of the way, I reinstalled the sconces, and I did it in like 5 minutes. And then we were at Lowe's the next day looking for something, and we were in the light, walking through the lighting section, and there was a sign, hey, install wall sconce, install new lights, $175. And Nikki realized that I just saved her $350. in about 5 minutes. So let's see. Yeah, non-standard doors are fun. Our front door is 83 by 36, and the standard door openings are 81 by 36. And we're going to replace the entire entryway 5 years from now, 10 years from now. So I didn't want to do a custom order door for a size I might not have down the road. So I was able to install some high quality pine across the top of the jamb and give myself that magic 2 inches. That's what she said. And then primed and painted it. And it's almost indistinguishable once the door with its top jamb, what do you call it? The little top part of the storm door is in place. Your eye just goes right past the added wood. So I saved a few $1,000s there with a $7 piece of pine. Hey, Matt again. I added Murata 10 nanofarad balance caps on the Fender style M full wave rectifier diode strings. Would I recommend them from a full wave bridge rectifier connecting to ground to see on some Marshalls? Well, they're not going to do much of anything for you in a Fender, but they won't hurt anything. In theory, they're snubber caps. In theory, they take some of the hash off that you can have diode noise. You can do it, and you may or may not detect any difference, but you will certainly convince yourself that it was worth it if you've done it, because it's more labor. I guess you could describe it as best practice, but it's not always adhered to, even by very good designers. It will do no harm as long as the caps are rated for very high voltage and are not going to develop any problems down the road. Because if one of the caps were to absorb moisture and short out, because it is very high voltage, then you lose a diode, and especially in a full bridge. Yeah. Or you can use a UF 4007. Yeah, Dave's right. Yeah. You can use a Fred if you want. I don't think you're going to hear much benefit from a Fred other than that, but yeah. Let's see. What coffee blend am I having today? I think we're still on the community cafe especial. Any local coffee makers from Memphis I would recommend? No, I've not. Hey there, Keith. Thanks for joining us. I've not had any local coffee that I could recommend to anyone that I like, but maybe I'll recommend some to Joe there. I'm kidding. Thank you, Joe, for being here. Memphis is not known for its radical coffee scene. There's some people who are trying to change that, but I think they need a little bit more time. Talking about Marshalls in a 2203 build, would I recommend any mods, or should I go stock? Man, that's tough. That's tough, because there are things that I don't find ideal about the 2203 or 2204. But it's purely subjective. And if you're building an app and you have questions like this, which means it tells me that you have not spent a lot of time with it, I would say build it exactly as it was. And then over time, if you think, I wish this had a little more gain, or I wish this had a little less gain, or I wish this had a little more treble, or a little more mids, or whatever, after you spent 6 months playing it and really know it, then come back here or go to one of Dave's streams and say, hey, I built a 2203. I like X, Y, and Z, but I wish Q were a little bit different. What can I do about Q? So I would say go stock, except for don't do the stock original ground schemes. See my videos on that, or Dave's videos. Dave's got a different approach, also works well. But the stock scheme, no bueno. Let's see. Hey, Jorge. Silver Face Twin is reverb on normal channel. All right, has the reverb on the normal channel. Want to reverse the no visible mod. Okay, replace electrical caps. Oscillator shows norm channel. Signal bleeds into V2B plate. Where could signal be crossing? Okay, let's see. I'm trying to rewrite this in my head. Okay, so you don't see any mods. Your scope shows your normal channel signals bleeding into V2B plate. It could be as simple as what preamp tube you're using. I've had that happen with Tungsol and Sovtek and other Russian preamp tubes in V1 or V2. And it can even happen from if you have it in V3. So the first thing you need to do is remove the V2 tube and see if you're still getting signal there from channel 1. From the other thing it can be, if you replace the electrolytic caps, I don't know if you meant the bypass caps as well, the cathode bypass caps, V2B and V1B and V2B share a cathode resistor and share a cathode bypass cap. And if that cap is faulty in any way, that can be one of the things where you get they'll mix within the tube. Those are the first two things to try, and then report back. But you would have to have a pretty good amount of bleed on the normal channel for it to appear in the tremolo, or for the tremolo to be audible. Sorry, for the reverb to be audible on the normal channel. The other thing you need to watch out for, hey Brad, is before you do any of that, make sure that it is not just the vibration of your speaker when you play the normal channel, which is then exciting the reverb tank, and you have the reverb knob up on the, because you can have the volume off on the reverb channel, but if the reverb knob's up, you can actually hear reverb coming through if the tank itself is just vibrating along with the speaker. So rule that out first. But if you are getting definite interaction of the volume pots, cathode bypass cap and or Russian preamp tubes are more likely. And it doesn't have to be a Russian preamp tube. It could be any tube which is faulty in a particular way. I've just seen that an awful lot with the Tungsol 12AX7s. Thank you, Joe. Appreciate that. It's very kind of you today. I keep forgetting, I keep coming over here behind the text. I need to remember to stay over here in my lane. I understand, Dave, that you indeed have a fantastic Highwatt. I believe you said it was like being punched in the face in a good way, in a loving way. And I bet you do. I think you sent that to Steve to bring that back to life. I bet he did a great job. I've not had too many Sound Cities in. Sorry. You know, Sound City, WEM, a couple others. There are relatively few of them in the United States compared to Britain. And of the ones that did make it here, they tend to be in New York and LA. Maybe some in the Chicago area, but it's not a very common amp to encounter here, and I've not encountered one. I did have a Sound City bass amp in once, and it was horribly over-engineered in the sense that things were just needlessly complicated. It had way too many electrolytic capacitors. Let's see. Hey, Thomas K. Any thoughts on the JBL speakers on a Fender Twin Reverb? Are they worth the look and the extra you pay for them? Well, they're very heavy. The thing with EVs and JBLs is that they're very heavy. And the other thing is that they have a very specific sound, which is, you know, very much a Marmite thing. If you play with overdrive and distortion, you might really hate them because those aluminum domes on the traditional JBLs can get really raspy, painful nails on the blackboard with overdrive. If you're chasing Jerry Garcia, first of all, he's really easy to catch these days. But if you're chasing that kind of sound, you probably would love them because they are very hi-fi. No, I'm not. When I was talking about old Sound Cities, Alex, I'm not talking about anything that Steve is doing today. If he's doing it today, I'm not familiar with that. But I'm talking about the old ones. So I'm not throwing any current production stuff under the bus. If I choose to throw a current company under the bus, I will be specific about that. I'm talking about the ones that are floating around that I've seen pictures of from the 70s. But are JBLs even being made today? I know that Weber's got some JBL inspired amps, but I'm not sure if JBLs are still being made. But the old ones can be very bright and they're very heavy, and I would be very cautious installing them in an old amp unless you're very sure of the health of the baffle, because the baffles and Fenders, whether it's a 78 twin that you got for $300 or it's a 64 that you got for $5,000, the baffles are essentially made of particle board, and they can absorb moisture over the years, and where the screws go in on the pre-72s can get damaged, and they can, things can happen. And then you put a really heavy speaker with all that torque on them, things can go really south. JBL or an EV can absolutely destroy a Fender baffle board if the amp is dropped even just like 6 inches. You're trying to lay it down in the back of your car and it gets away from you. That can do it in. So there are those that will absolutely love it. There are those who think they will love it, and they have pictures of their particular hero, and you can see the little shiny silver domes coming through, and they get one, and then they're going to love it because they think they're supposed to. And there are those who are like, well, that's a lot of weight and cost just for efficiency. And there are other speakers today that are very efficient for a lot less money, a lot less weight. I mean, if you're looking for I'll say a similar sound in terms of what you're trying to achieve with the speaker. I'm not saying it sounds like the JBL, but try the Eminence Wizard. It's incredibly loud, incredibly efficient, incredibly clean, and costs a hell of a lot less and weighs a hell of a lot less. Hey, John had 2 black-faced deluxe reverbs on the bench. Amp A had a lot of fourth order harmonics on the vibe channel. Amp B, not much. Amp B had original ceramic at V4B. Amp I can't talk. Amp B, orange drop. Is that likely the source? A, sounds sparkly. Yeah, that original cap at V4B is a big part of it. So's the 20 on V2B. To be or not to be. A lot of people replace the phase inverter input cap, the 20 nanofarad cap on V2B, and V4B is the you had a ceramic on V4B. V4B should be a little red film cap. The little dark red film cap. That's a film, not a ceramic, but it does have a different sound than orange drop. Are you sure that was the only one that was different? What about the phase inverter input cap and the 20 nanofarad cap on V2B, which is the vibrato channel? Those are where I would expect to get that kind of swirly, sparkly stuff out, the goodness that we seek out of ceramics. V2B, okay. V2B or not V2B? That was indeed the question. Sorry, V2B. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I have found that of the currently available caps, the Vishay 562 R, the 562 series, 1 kilovolt ceramics are the way to go for that, and it sounds an awful lot like the originals. But that is, people talk about carbon comp versus ceramic disc, or carbon comp versus carbon film or versus metal film, and people talk about orange drops versus Sozos. A lot of that stuff is, maybe you hear it, maybe you don't. What degree doesn't matter. On the smaller picofarad values, it matters a lot in terms of the material. And in that position on a Fender V2B, that matters a lot in my experience. So people like to overlook that stuff, or they just get a generic silver mica because it's cheap and they don't think it's important. And that's one of the most critical caps in a Fender circuit as far as that sparkle that you're describing. Other people will disagree, but they don't have my microphone, and I do. So, hey, Johnny Locke. Last week he asked about what amp to purchase. He had been interested in Mesa Boogie before. Yesterday I received my Friedman Little Sister head and cab. Thanks. See, Dave, you weren't even here, and I said nice things about you. You weren't even here, and I said nice things about you. Because it's easy to say nice things about guys like Dave or John Suhr because they make good stuff. They make good stuff. They're not trying to rip anyone off. I want this to exist because I want a cool thing to be in the world. I think people might enjoy this thing. And it's not just that they'll enjoy it and want to buy it. It needs to last. He's never going to make it at this rate. The MBAs are going to write him off immediately because he's doing everything wrong. He's not maximizing profit. But I think Johnny is one of many people who actually will profit from that approach. It's so easy to recommend these good things, and it's not just Dave and John. I can recommend a car, especially if you're not allergic to the snot. Top Hat is great. I keep saying Germino is great. There's so many people doing it right. Swart, and I've heard good things about Rev. Not been inside one. I want to be able to have a long list of positive. I've got the whole of things to avoid. Everyone knows that, and I've got a list like this of really good stuff. I'd like to make that list longer. So, send me more good amps, people, so I can add to the list. Head First, I've not tried, but I'm sure that Head First is great. That's what I need to do. I need to get my buddy to send me one. Jace, if you watch this, send me one of your amps. Let me do a tech review of it. I'm sure it's fantastic. In fact, I'm pretty mega confident that it should be. I helped him with a few things on the PCB design of the Alta. Back when he was just drawing it all out in his computer and dreaming of what the amp should be. I'm not taking credit for that amp and his success. I was just another pair of eyes at a time when sometimes you stare at a thing too long, you don't see it anymore. And I've been there, Brad's been there, Jace was there at that moment, and I was like, hey, have you considered this? And he's like, oh, yeah, okay, that makes everything else easier. I always forget that Head First is here in the States now, not just Australia. Lefty Mike, email me. I'd be glad to take a look at your rev. Let's see, next question. Are there any gotchas with using boost converters? Heat, low current supply, and a power supply to make a pedal-sized tube preamps. Well, there are a million gotchas, but it can be done. Kingsley, I think he's in the UK. Kingsley makes fantastic tube-based guitar pedals, and he uses a very good booster circuit. And I did a review of his pedal on the channel. I've got 2 videos up on that. And he's a Brit in Canada. Good to know that, Dustin. So he's Canadian. Another reason to like him. And I'd expected to think, okay, it's got another pedal with tubes, marketing tubes, starved voltage, starved current. No, he did it right. There was like over 200, 300 volts. It sounded great. It did the thing. It was well made across the board. Now, I did not reverse engineer what he had done because I don't have time and I didn't have the inclination. It's an interesting thing when you find a circuit you do like. Sometimes when you have time, you do reverse engineer it, not to copy it, not to copy someone's homework, just to see, the skin of cat analogy is kind of gross, but how did they do it? Because on paper there are like 30 different ways to do it, and you can go down all these different paths, and it's like a flow chart. And then you end up with the simplest. Simplest is usually best. And he found a really good, simple way to do that. And I would be intrigued to look at it from a design perspective. Not that I want to make tube bass pedals, but I don't know exactly what he did or what chip he used. But yeah, there's so many ways to get it wrong. What are my thoughts on how using partridge output transformers versus Drake or diagonals help to define the sound of a Highwatt or Laney compared to a Marshall? Well, I think marginal. Marginal. If Diagonal or Drake had a transformer in their catalog that met those needs, or they were asked to build one that met those needs, because it's a different current and power situation and impedance situation than in a Marshall. Then the resulting option where you'd say, here's the partridge version of the DR103, here's the one that had Drake's, this one that you'd have minor fluctuation, slight differences, like in an AC30, whether it was the Haddon or the Albion or the Woden, they're all slightly different, but they're all slightly different variations of the same core idea. As far as I know, Drake and Diagonals never made any transformer that would have been suitable for the Highwatt design, so they weren't even in the running. But the thing about the larger point is that the phase inverter of a Highwatt is bizarre. The entire output section is kind of bizarre from a certain point of view. So that is going to be the voltage is present. The voltage is present, the way the filtering is done, and the way the phase inverter interacts with the negative feedback and all that. That is going to be the main factor that makes it a Highwatt more than the iron that they used. Let's see. Windswept Guitar says, I bought a hand-wired 2-channel amp. The channels are wired out of phase, and there is no foot switch to split them. So I kind of use an out-of-phase 1:2 splitter to use both channels in phase. Yeah, you're describing the ABY pedal. I would look at Radial. There's some other companies that make good ones, but Radial is an easy one to recommend. And basically what you want to do is you want to take your guitar, and it goes into the box. And out of the box, it's going to go to channel A and to channel B. In channel B, you can isolate the ground so you don't have a ground loop, and you can invert the polarity of channel B if you want to. And then you can have that channel or both channels. And if you have both channels, you can have them in or out of phase. And they're not cheap. They're about $150 maybe, but they are really good and really rugged and well designed. And you're going to be able to do everything that you want to do, and you can use it with a whole bunch of amps, multiple channels on one amp, or different amps at the same time. And sometimes you'll have two amps, and they both have the same polarity electronically, but one of them had its speakers wired backwards, and so that polarity switch on the B output on the Radial is really nice to have, because it can change depending on which pairing of amps you're using, which pairing of channels you're using. So it's much nicer to push a button than to go back and rewire a speaker cab. Hey, Michael. 62 Marshall Bluesbreaker reissue. What's my thoughts? Also, are Magnetones overpriced Marshalls? The Bluesbreaker reissue is sometimes a really good amp, and sometimes an amp where they installed the output transformer in the wrong orientation, or the power transformer in the wrong orientation, depending on your perspective. The other issue is that even the really good ones, the original 90s and early 2000s power transformer often fails. And it's the transformers that were being used by Marshalls and Voxes under Korg management in the 90s tend to fail. When they fail, they emit a big noise field, and it emits itself. So it's such a big field that it's being picked up by the input of the phase inverter. It's horrible to deal with. And the only fix for that really typically is to replace the power transformer. And on some of the not JTM45, Bluesbreaker reissues, they have the transformers with the same orientation, And so you get a bunch of hum from the orientation of the power transformer being the same as the orientation of the output transformer. So you've got to rotate one or the other so they're in each other's null. And that can be a big expense. I've got videos up on the channel on the Bluesbreaker reissue. Some had the orientation problem, some did not. I don't know what years or serial number ranges. It's just something to look at. And I show you how to detect it. You can visibly spot it once you see those videos. The other issue with all of the Bluesbreakers, originals and the reissues, is that the tremolo sucks. The tremolo is terrible. Hey, we put tremolo in here. It kind of sort of works. It's really easy to disconnect the tremolo. Then you've got a combo version of JTM45, which sounds awesome. But they do look awesome, especially the thin panel ones like Clapton used. That's one of the most beautiful looking amps ever made. Coffee Black in Memphis has a nice selection of Ethiopian and Colombian coffees. I'll check that out. I've not gone there. I don't know if they're roasting them here or they're bringing them in already roasted or whatever. But I've got part of a question here. 2.7K, 6.68 microfarad on the second stage cathode. 10 microfarad coupling, 10 nanofarad coupling caps. Did I miss something before that? I don't see anything before that. Well, I guess it's just a statement. Yes, those exist. Come by the amp panel on Sunday. Is that to me, Dave? I guess you're doing that. I'll check in. Would I consider a Bassbreaker 15 for home use if it's available for under $400? I'm going to give a complicated answer to that question. I've got a friend in Brooklyn who has a Bassbreaker, and he loves it, He thinks it's just so much fun to use. He loves the sounds it gets out of it. And I've told him that it will not be a reliable amp, and it won't be something worth fixing when the inevitable happens, and that the auto bias issues that some of the Bassbreakers have is just a death knell, unless you want to spend a ton of money having it repaired. He doesn't care. He likes it. While it's working, he likes it. And if it dies, he won't sweat that $400. He's a professional musician. I'm not going to drop the name, but he's a professional musician, tours the world, lives in a really nice brownstone in Brooklyn, and he's got a Bassbreaker that he likes, and he's got like 15 other fantastic amps that most of us would dream of having. He also likes the Bassbreaker. So if you're fine with, hey, I spent $400 on this thing and I got 2 years out of it and then it died, and you're like, oh, well, then fine, it's a fine choice. But if $400 is a large chunk of money for you that you would have to consider, all right, I'm going to have ramen for a week, or, I have to put this on my credit card, and if I pay it off for 6 months, and if you're in that situation, I would not recommend the Bassbreaker. It is only justifiable, in my opinion, to those with disposable income. Hey, Sunzu, he's got a lefty Yamaha Rev Star Standard with stainless steel frets that become scratchy after you do vibrato on one fret for about 10 seconds. Elixir strings, any idea why this happens? Well, that's weird. You shouldn't be having any scratches on stainless steel frets for 10 seconds. Are you sure it's the fret that's becoming scratchy? You're not rubbing the rosewood, depending on your finger pressure? That's really strange. I would take it to see what Brad says on that issue, but hopefully he'll weigh in on that. I would think that if you were to take that to a tech who's set up to work with stainless steel frets, they could very quickly verify the problem or not verify the problem, and they could say, okay, well, whatever's happening, I'm going to give this a quick polish, and they won't happen again. But I can't. It doesn't make sense as just in terms of the metal hardnesses go. But you could be rubbing again. I mean, I can do that with this thing. This is not stainless steel. But you know, if I put too much pressure, I can't, you can't hear it, but I can find myself hearing myself rubbing against the rosewood if I put too much pressure down. But maybe maybe Brad might have something there. It could be a inconsistency in the coating, where the coating itself is coming off because of the hardness of the stainless steel, and that's affecting the sound of the string. Maybe you're hearing the coating break. I'm not a big fan of elixirs. I will say that the D'Addario XSs that I put on the acoustics are still sounding great. Maybe I'll grab one of those after this break. We're about to do a break in like 4 minutes, at which point I might. It's on the plain strings, definitely at the rosewood. I would try a different coating. Try a string with a different coating. See if the problem goes away. You may just be killing your elixirs. So I may show off the XSs. I'm very pleased with those long term. Though I initially thought they felt a bit weird, I've gotten more used to them. Quite fancy a whim for that early Oasis sound, mostly hiss. Ah, man, I loathe Oasis. I loathe Oasis. I know that I'm in the minority. Besides the fact that they're just totally derivative copycats. They're such pleasant people when you listen to interviews with them. Just wonderful, wonderful people. I want to have more people like that in my life. Let's see. My opinion on design and build quality of amps built by Mojotone. I have not had an amp in front of me that Mojotone built. I have seen many Mojotone kits that others assembled, but I have not been inside an amp that Mojotone sells pre-made. So I don't have an opinion of them. I expect that they're quite good. I know that Keith Williams here, Private World, got a 5E3 Tweed built by Mojotone. Per my suggestion, I was like, Keith, you need to know this amp. I'm kidding with the schmutz, but and he says it sounds really good, and I bet it does. I bet they make a very good. They're a Toyota. It's probably a Toyota Corolla. It's not gonna be a Rolls. It's not gonna be a Ferrari. It's gonna be a Toyota Corolla. And so, does it get you to the grocery store under 5 seconds flat? No, but it gets you to the grocery store every day for 20 years. You know, so I think they might be a little more sexy than that. But I imagine that they're just a good, consistent choice. And that's really high praise these days when you look at the amp market overall. We need more Toyota Corollas and fewer things that like to blow out all their tires and catch on fire. How goes the renovations? Well, old guy, I've been working on the porch this last week, and see my rant at the beginning of this video, this stream for that. All right, yeah, we're going to go ahead and we'll come back to MBM Carp Full question after this next break. We're going to do a 7-minute intermission. We do 2 7-minute intermissions, one at the top of each hour. Those of you who do not have premium or ad blockers will get an ad so that I can afford to buy the same front door repeatedly from Lowe's, apparently. But most of you won't. But for those of you who get one, enjoy. Sorry, some goodies for the channel arrived, and the postman giveth and he taketh away. So I've Department of Vehicle Registration trying to renew my tags. So, ba-doo. Real quick before I get on to the, this might probably be gonna be out of tune. The weather's changed like 25 degrees in the last 2 days. Changed more than that in the last 2 years. Holy shit! Yeah, man. All right, Diodario, I'm ready for my endorsement now. This guitar sat over there for a week and a half unplayed, and the weather has changed 25 degrees, and the humidity level has gone up and down, and these excesses are almost in tune. Not quite, but I was expecting it to be all this, and it was only a little bit that. Still sounding quite bright though. Well, it's got the EQ for my voice, and my voice is kind of boomy. For those of you who find this stream and have not familiarized yourself, that was a deliberate fuck up. I am not the world's best player, but I do have a sense of humor. And you have to have a sense of humor about yourself if you're going to play on YouTube. All right, back to the questions. For an early 70s Pro Reverb and Vibrolux reverb, to tame the volume sometimes at home, would disengaging a speaker and running them at 8 ohms in a modern house overstress the amp? MBM Carpful says. It's going to depend on a few things. First of all, the wattage of your speakers. Because a Pro Reverb, even with impedance mismatch, is going to be putting out 50 watts. I mean, clean 40 to 45 watts. But it's going to be putting out more than 50 watts. So you don't want to have two 40-watt speakers and disconnect one speaker. You'll kill the speaker. Same for the Vibrolux. If you have two 20-watt speakers and you disconnect one of the speakers, that 28-watt amp, that's 28 watts clean. It's going to be put out 35 to 40 watts when you push it, which means that a 20-watt speaker won't be happy. The last Vibrolux reverb that I had on the channel, I put in two 65-watt speakers and showed that it is indeed safe to disconnect one of the speakers if you have speakers that are rated for quite a bit more wattage than the amp is capable of ever putting out. And in that case, we did not do any impedance tricks. We just disconnected a speaker, we took the 3 dB loss by having the speakers mismatch, by the impedance mismatch, and we took the 3-ish dB decrease of only having one speaker with only that much air being moved, because we have the surface area of the speakers, and that was a very nice drop in volume. It does not hurt a thing, but I made sure that the bias was still stable. The bias was in a happy place. Wall voltage, you bias the amp for the wall voltage. I would want to know what my wall voltage was if bias it at 117 volts and the wall voltage goes up. Right now we're 118, 119 in Memphis. Later today that might be 127. So there's no way of knowing. But that's a separate issue from the speaker thing. So try to at least be aware of what your wall voltage is and bias to accommodate the highest normal swings. But in terms of the speaker, yeah, it's totally safe for both amps as long as you have really high rated speakers. I would do at least 65 watts in both amps. I would not do that with a twin because you'd have to have 100-watt speakers, and those are much more expensive. And there's no point in having a twin that you want to run at the level of a Pro Reverb. Get another amp. Get a Deluxe Reverb and a twin, or a Princeton and a twin, or there's a reason there are different amp models. You only need to move any one amp within a range of its desired volume. And if you're trying to do a big change to the amp's volume, but unless we're talking about a good master volume amp, you may have the wrong amp for you. Like if you want something for small gigs and you're just keeping up with a jazz drummer plays with brushes, a twin reverbs will do the job, but it's the wrong tool. A Princeton or a deluxe reverb will probably make you happier. Or you could be one of those insane people who uses the little polytones. And everything sounds like this because of jazz. Jazz. I got a Suhr telly for my birthday, Adrian says, in big part because of my glowing reviews of their work, and I've never been more in love with a guitar. Well, good, man. John makes great guitars, great amps. He's a good guy. So I'm glad to introduce you, so to speak. Yeah, every PCB design you get better, you try to improve every time. I don't know anyone who's any good at this who's happy about their current level. Or they may be less dissatisfied with their current level, but they look what they did 5 years ago, think, man, what was I thinking? We're not done yet. The people who are just like, I do the best work and I'm a genius, and people who call themselves a guru, avoid, avoid, avoid. Can someone make a Hey T777, can someone make a 1x12 combo like the Vox ACC1 that is lighter in weight and better? I don't know what the ACC1 is. There are very light 1x12 combos out there. You can get a Neo speaker. You can get really lightweight pine. I'm sure someone out there is trying to make something out of carbon fiber. Yeah, you can. But I don't know what the ACC1 is. And, the weight of a combo is, AC15C1. Very different than an ACC1. The AC15C1 is a fantastic amp in a heavy ass cabinet. And I don't understand why they've chosen something ridiculously heavy. The issue is, in terms of, from the owner's perspective, Vox should just make a lighter weight cab for the damn things. The issue is if you have a cab made for that amp, any one-offs are expensive, and getting a Vox cosmetics, they're tricky to do with the valence and the gold stripping, and then if you can even get the grill cloth. It gets artificially expensive, but yeah, someone, it used to be you could go, for most of the Voxes that were being made, you'd go to North Coast Music and get one of their repro cabs for, but they've stopped doing that. I think they're out of business, which is sad. But yeah, if there was a lightweight, sane weight version of the AC15 cabinet, I'd be all over that. Same for the 30. The 30 is even heavier. I mean, it's like, I think whoever did the PV Butcher got hired by Vox today to make their current cabs, because they're masochists, man. They're masochists. Other than that, it's a great little amp. I have no idea who you're talking to, all-knowing amp guru. I am not an all-knowing amp guru. Dave's not an all-knowing amp guru. I've never met any actual all-knowing amp gurus. I've just met some people who call themselves that. Anyway, does letting tubes warm up for 20 minutes sound better than just letting them warm up for 2 minutes? Better is subjective. Different is objective. They're going to sound different. You got to, as Dave points out, you got to wait for the voltage to stabilize. But then, depending on the materials of the components inside the amp and the assembly methods, things can change. If you have an old Fender and all of a sudden the internal temperature rises quite a bit over the course of an hour, then all the resistors and capacitors will be behaving slightly differently as the temperature increases. And as the temperature increases, usually the humidity decreases, and all these things can change. As to whether they're better or worse, that's purely subjective and up to you, but they are going to be demonstrably different. So I would say that 10 minutes versus an hour is the better test than 2 minutes versus 20 minutes, because like Dave says, 2 minutes, the tubes are just, they're working, but they're not really stable yet. It's one of the reasons when we bias amps, we do initial bias, we check it 15 minutes later, we check it 15 minutes later. I would say if you can, under controlled circumstances, use a looper pedal, record the same part when an amp has been on 2 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, and an hour. So it's the same signal, the same going in, the mic conditions are the same. The only thing that changes are the time and the conditions the amp is operating at. See if you hear it. And you won't hear it on all amps. Not all amps have variability with temperature, or at least very small. Many modern amps have very little variability with temperature and humidity. It's there, but it may not be anything that we can really... A scope can see it, but we can't necessarily hear it. Unless you're Eric Johnson, in which case you just need to put the thing on a piece of plywood and rotate it 45 degrees. Hey, Eckhard, what are my thoughts on the Marshall JCM 800 lead 4210 1x12 combo? I have sentimental memories of it. My first tube amp. I don't recall which model that is. Is that a 1x12 version of the 2204? Let me look that up really fast. So Marshall 4210. If I can remember how to spell. Oh, it's split channel reverb. Okay, yeah, I don't like those myself. I find the split channel reverbs to be a not very good clean sound and a not very Marshally overdrive sound, and then a horrible circuit to change channels. But if you love it, that's great. I think your sentimental memories of it are probably going to be better than the actual amp if you were to have one again. But maybe you still have it. Maybe you think I'm wrong. Some people love them. I find them to be not a very good clean, not the best sound Marshall ever did as far as the Marshall sound. And especially as the components age, that channel switching circuit is just nuts. And they bleed. They bleed a lot. It's hard for me to remember which model number is which, except for certain ones like the 87, the 59, the 2203, 2204. There's so many model numbers that Marshall had, and many of which are coincidentally almost years, like the Bluesbreaker 1962. Well, it's an amp that came out in 65 or 66. Anyway, I have a hard time remembering strings of letters and numbers anyway. Hey, Robbie F. Hey, Greenballs, effects is a high voltage crucial to building a good sounding valve overdrive pedal. I've seen many schematics running 12x7s on a 9-volt supply. Well, if you want it to actually sound good, yeah. In terms of any reason to use a tube, because if you're starving the tube of current and voltage, there's no reason to use the tube. There's so many better devices, components to design a pedal around. When I was doing pedals, I didn't even do 9 volts for my pedals. I did plus minus 15. Because I wanted to have options, but I'm weird that way. You can make a pedal using 9 volts, and it has a tube in it, and I don't think you'd be able to tell any damn difference between the sound of that tube and doing the same approach with the damn 4558. I think if you're gonna waste people's time and money, and have them have a big expense of buying something that takes tubes and then having to buy $30 12x7s as time goes on, give them a sonic benefit to that. Make it worth it. So the Kingsley, yes. The old ART mic pre's, total garbage. A lot of the stuff out there, marketing tubes, and there'll be a little orange LED in there to make it have the tube glow. What was I going to say? If you want an extreme example of how everything was done right on paper, but the actual implementation was so off the wall bad, look at my channel for the Matchless Dirt Box videos. I got 3 or 4 showing how I was able to make that thing work, but it just never would have as originally sold. And people pay extra hundreds of dollars for that thing because it's a matchless and it's a chrome pedal and it's got a tube in it, so it's got like 2 or 3 tubes in it, so it's got to be great, right? No, it was a Terrible little thing. Unusable in sound until some fundamental changes were made. Hey, Goody Guitars. Hey, cool. You got your crate up and running. Which crate is it? Is it one of the VC series, the Vintage Club? Those are cool. But the quick connect broke for the reverb twice. I even moved the reverb tank away from the transformer. Quick connects don't always. Did the quick connect break on the board, or did the quick connect break off of the wire? Because that's usually more common for the especially for the crimp-on quick connects. That wire flexes and just breaks right there. I'm not a big fan of quick connects, but lots of hum. Yeah, the hot box and the dirt box. Look at, if you, given your username Greenballs Effect, I think you'd be interested to look at the videos I got on the Matchless Dirt Box. People love Matchless, and I understand why, because when those things came out, compared to what Fender and Marshall were doing at the time, especially what Fender was doing at the time, it was great, but they're not all that, and they have weird choices that end up, you can see some of my Matchless videos where they consistently kill themselves because they were chasing a running hot AC30 reality that never existed. Hey, Mr. Colby. Was given early 40s radio in disrepair. When fixed, it'll have Bluetooth and aux input options. Needs a field coil speaker. Advice on these. They're priced all over the map to the old Tom Snyder show. Wow, thanks, man. So how the hell? I saw, I appreciate the super chat, by the way. I saw the photos of that because he asked if I'd be interested in repairing it, and I'm like, nope, that's a money pit. You're actually going to fix the tube circuit and then add Bluetooth and aux input options? I would just use that cabinet and put a modern amplifier and circuitry, buy something and put it in the back, make a shelf in the back of that old cabinet, because the cabinet's beautiful, but those old tube radios from that era, they don't sound good. They weren't designed to sound good. The speakers weren't designed to sound good. But if you really want a field coil speaker, call my buddy Dave Halford, halfordloudspeakers.com, HALFORD. I'll text you after the chat. He's got to know what your best options are for what, because most field coil speakers that are out there that you can buy will need to be reconed, potentially, new voice coils, potentially even have the field coil rewound. And he'll know which ones there are still kits for, which ones you can work on, which ones are worth investing in, and which ones were trash. Because remember, field coil speakers are very primitive by today's standards. And if you want to have the sound of an old 40s radio, you can just, dial in an EQ preset on your phone and coming to you live, it's the Little Orphan Annie show, or Mr. blah, 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 please come to aisle 7, all that stuff. You can do that electronically now and still have the option to say, well, yeah, it looks cool, but it also sounds good. Or you can go the other direction and make it sound great with a little monoblock in there. Just be a little power amp that you could plug with a USB or what do you call it? TRS plug on that you could plug your iPhone into, and hey, you plug my iPhone, play my Apple Music or whatever, or Spotify, whatever, and then into a little monoblock tube amp in the back of this thing into a really good sounding speaker. Most field coil speakers have some serious limitations, but talk to Dave. Hey, Chengo, looking for a B15N for recording in small venues. What should I be looking for when scoping potential rigs? Well, if you want a B15, look for a 60s or 70s B15 that's in good shape. And before you spend the money for something like that, make sure you can play it and test that it's working well. Because if most B15s are very serviceable and can be made fantastic again. But if something is wrong with one of the transformers, it is extraordinarily expensive to have the transformer rewound. Unless you're playing at a very high level, in which case the budget's not as much of a concern, I would question whether the B15N is still the best choice these days, because it is a very specialized, very low volume amp. Now, I've worked on several, and they're cool for what they are. And if you have a recording studio where you can really bring out the nuances, that's great. But for live use, most PAs, you're going to be better off using a Sans amp and just going direct. And that's just the reality of our world. So it is most Ampegs in general for bass. You know, like an SVT is a fantastic thing when it's working, but it's like a British sports car. You need to have 4 of them, so on any given day, one of them might be drivable. Now, the really heavy ones are the SVTs and AD66. The B15s and the B12s are the Portaflex, where the speaker is on the bottom, it's a combo, and then the top flips over, the flip tops. And they sound great, and they were really phenomenal, and a phenomenal advance in how you can make a bass sound as far as how the cabs reported. So if it was 1966, it's one of the best options ever made. But it's not 1966 anymore. You might be happier with like an Aguilar tone hammer rig. But given the cost of a B15N, I would buy from a dealer, make sure it's not shady, and see if you can say, all right, I need 30 days return policy because I want to take this to attack and get it checked out. You want to be very sure the transformers are good and that nothing has been messed up inside, because it is a big expense to get a very niche kind of sound, and they're not loud enough for most stages. Oh, the Elixir plane strings aren't actually coated. That's weird, that issue with the RevStar stainless frets. Yeah, Sun Tzu, email me, shoot a phone video of it, or whatever, whether you do a video and send me a link to it, or whether you just send me the video in an email. I'd be glad to look at it. That's weird. Apparently, I'm not as much of a minority when it comes to the Gallagher brothers. What's that awful song? Whenever someone, I go to some place and there are these things, someone starts playing that one song. It's not Champagne Supernova. And they're like, do you know how to play it? And I'm like, well, I hear what you're playing, and yeah, I could, but I'm going to go get a beer. Wonderwall. Oh, my God. I mean, just talk about Beatles derivative, choosing the most obscure little electronic project that George Harrison ever did, and then doesn't fucking mean anything. Ugh. Anyway, people go nuts over that, and I walk away. That's not my thing. But yes, I guess I technically could play it. I choose not to. Hey, Wes, thanks for joining us. While I'm looking for the next question, last night about 1:30 in the morning, my phone beeps, and it's Brad to show me the shiny new Seiko solar chronograph watch he bought. So, in solidarity, Brad, I'm also sporting a Seiko solar chronograph. So, good of you to reach out. That's the trouble with being friends with someone in Australia. Your phone beeps all time of the night. And I'm always very cautious, like, hey, I should get in touch with Brad. Oh, he's fucking asleep. I think he only sleeps for like 3 hours, so it's easier to get in touch with him. Just clicked over 5 a.m. here, yeah. Hey, Frank. Hey, Claritin Blue. Not a question about amps. Did I see the announcement that the BIOS going? Yeah. So I go to London, go to the British Museum, and I'm like, man, the one thing, I saw I saw the Sutton Hoo helmet, I saw the chess pieces, I saw so much wonderful things that I've been looking at in pictures all my life. I'm like, no, I just need to get the bio tapestry. So next trip we're gonna maybe do Netherlands and Belgium and Normandy, and include the bio tapestry. So that's still our plan. Maybe next year or the year after. Maybe I need to wait till it's back in Bayeux, because it's going to London. I just can't miss. I can't make that thing. Just keep missing it. We went to our last when we were in Vienna and Paris. We went to all these museums that were supposed to have some of the world's best. Not Bruegels. Not Jean Van Eyck either. Why is my brain going away? Girl with the pearl earring. Not Bruegel. Anyway, so we went to all these museums supposed to have some of the best ones, and they were all of them on loan to another museum in Amsterdam for an exhibit there at the Rijksmuseum. We actually did see one that was fantastic. Someone tell me the name of the painter, and I can't get past Van Eyck. It's not Van Eyck. Driving me nuts. It'll come to me. Usually it's right there. I just have that information, and it's Vermeer. Thank you. Anyway, all but one of the most known Vermeers were all in Amsterdam when we were in Paris and Vienna. We did see the one with the map. Can't remember the name of it. The cartographer, which was fantastic. But so I'll just have to go back at some point. Thank you for reaching out on that subject, Claritin Blue. It's nice to have more interest than just the amps on here. I know some others don't agree. Hey, J. Dave Foster, I'm very glad to read that. It makes me very happy to know that. Thank you. No, not Rembrandt, though they do have quite a few Rembrandts at the Rijksmuseum. Man, every time we go to any museum ever where there's some damn creepy dude with a selfie, it's always Rembrandt. Let's see. That's an art joke for you guys. But yeah, his selfies are in every museum. There's that fucking guy again. Let's see. Hey, the J Caster. Do I have any experience with a Carbon 3200 MTS? I have no experience with it. I personally would avoid Carvins. They're just built really terribly. And that was always the point, to be even cheaper than PV back in the day. Do you guys, how many of you are old enough to remember the little Carvin mini catalogs? Unless you're really a big fan of Starship, in which case that's clearly the best path for you. But I don't think I would recommend it myself. The Rothko room at the Tate is a strangely emotional experience. Yeah, the Rothko room at the Tate and all the Turners at the Tate Britain green balls. Very, very nice. A lot of the Tate Modern I could not stomach, but the Rothko room was very, 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 very cool. And it is odd how the Rothkos and the Miros, which don't look like, if you see a picture of them, they don't look like much at all. But when you're in a space and they're there and they're very large and they definitely have an emotional effect that you would not expect. They're much greater than the sum of the parts. Let's see. Glad you got the hum out. Hey, Tanvir Taraftar. I have not had any of the newer hand-wired reissues in. Do I think they're worth the extra investment? I hope so, because they cost more money, but I've not been inside one. And I hope that they're great, but until I have one in, I have no opinion other than they probably exist. And if I have one in before I even open up, I will know that it definitely exists, and then later I'll have more of an opinion. I will get to the Dolly question later. I'm just putting this up here for you, Thomas, because I know that you're waiting for some reaction to that. I admit I've heard this joke before, and as lame jokes go, it is much better than the actual song. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, we've seen both Starry Nights. It is something else to see Van Goghs in person when you see the texture. Just, I don't want to make this just the art channel all of a sudden, but yeah, the reason certain painters are compelling, and like to stand in front of the ambassadors by Holbein at the National Gallery in London, and to be the one to, it's a great painting, but then you see it from the right perspective, and then you see the hidden forced perspective object. I won't spoil it for those of you who don't know it, but to be the one to take your partner and say, but stand over here and now look at it this way, and to see the light bulb, it's fantastic. Like when we were in Vienna, we went to the Secession Building. In fact, I got us an apartment right across the Nachtmarkt from the Secession Building, because Nikki's such a big Bauhaus and Vienna secession movement fan that she's been looking at pictures of the Secession Building all her life, and there we were. We had to walk past it every day when we went to the rest of the city. Anyway, we went down to see the Beethoven frieze, and so she's walking around and she's looking at the Beethoven frieze, and that's one level. That's one level of it. But then they had headphones that were playing Beethoven's Ninth in there, so I put them on me. I found out where we were in the symphony. I put them. I said, Nikki, you've got to hear this. And I put the headphones on, and she's hearing Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, which is more than just the Ode to Joy. And I said, but we're here because it's a long mural that has a timeline from the beginning of the symphony to the end of the symphony. And when I was able to take her to the point of the art that emotionally tied into the point of the symphony, and then slowly walked to the right. By the time we got to Ode to Joy at the end, she was in tears. And to be able to introduce people to that is a great, great source of joy for myself. And I know, I'm supposed to talk about guitars and amps and bullshit, but I can't just be that. Sorry to go on and on, but that's kind of my whole shtick. Have you ever been to the Dolly Museum in St. Petersburg, Florida? No. When I was a freshman in college, some of my friends at the time were going to go down to St. Petersburg that summer and work as bartenders, because there's a bartending course you can take for like a week and then get a job at the hotels down there. And they did that, and they went to the Dolly Museum, and they told me all about it. But I was not allowed to go that summer down to Florida and learn to be a bartender, so I did not go. And I've only been to St. Petersburg once. I was driving through St. Petersburg Clearwater, but someday I'll go back. The trouble with going to St. Petersburg Clearwater is the entire west coast of Florida is a giant parking lot. And so it takes forever to get anywhere. It's like they have stoplights on the highway. It's like instead of expressways, it's just a giant Walmart parking lot. And then the whole state closes at 9 o'clock. And it's all like retirees and death metal cults. There's nothing in between. I suppose when you get down towards Miami, it gets a little less like that. But it is a frustrating thing getting there from here. Martin, we want to go to Edinburgh so much, and Glasgow. I know you probably have a dog in that fight, but I am I'm open to enjoying both cities as long as they're not fucking Aberdeen. Screw those guys, right? Yeah, we want to go. I can't believe I could not remember Vermeer. Anyway, it's the only reason we're planning on going to Delft. It's just I want to. I mean, it's not because of the plates. I want to see what that light's like. Hey, Lefty Mike, he just watched a demo of Dan Huff's signature guitar, which has a preamp in it. It piqued his interest. What's my take on preamps and guitars? I personally don't see the point, having been down that road with a whole bunch of stuff with EMGs and lace sensors and all that stuff. I think it's an expensive thing to put in a guitar. You have to have batteries, typically. You know, they've got the rechargeable USB connections these days, but still, it's a lot to put in a guitar. Then you have one guitar that has that circuit in it, whereas if you build that thing into a pedal, then you can use that with all your guitars if you design everything correctly. But the impedance thing is an issue. So I think if you're a player like Dan Huff or Lukather back in the day, it can make sense. I think it's a complication that's not necessary for most people. I hate I hate changing batteries in a guitar. Well, Andy, in defense, almost any painting, the eyes will follow you. It's just the way we see perspective. But the Mona Lisa is very, very much so. But it's that's almost a smile that gets me. But the Mona Lisa is way overhyped. When you go to the Louvre and there's just that crazy line to get 10 seconds in front of it. We saw it on our last trip. We went first thing in the morning on our last day in Paris and rushed up the stairs. So we're like only 10 people in front of us. So we saw her. But there's so many better things in the hallway outside. There are 3 other Da Vinci's right outside her room that tourists are running past to get into the line to go look at the Mona Lisa through plexiglass. And you can see the Virgin of the Rocks. You can see Mary and Sarah. Is it Sarah? I don't remember Mary's sister's name, and John and Jesus, which is like I can't remember the name of that painting, but it's the painting that's used in every art composition class I've ever taken, or photography composition class, because it's done apparently to the Fibonacci spiral golden ratio. And right behind, if you're in the line to the Mona Lisa, right behind you is the Wedding of Canaan, which is phenomenal. So nothing against Legia Khan, but there's so many equivalently fantastic paintings that the tourists are just running past, which is kind of nice because you're like, oh, you go get your 10 seconds with her after 30 minutes in line. I'm going to enjoy the rest of the art with some elbow room. Hey, Jorge, I'm glad to know you fixed it. The V2 bypass cap was connected to the V3 cathode. Maybe a new mod for both channels with reverb, not tremolo. Hey, I'm glad that helped. I'm wondering how the V2 bypass cap was connected to. Did you have both caps connected to V3 cathode? That's interesting. But that'll certainly do it, because you were going to have the 2 channels mixing at that stage if you don't have a fully bypassed cap there. So I'm glad it was able to work. Thank you. I feel amazing. Thank you, Jorge. You make me feel amazing. Which is not something I've said to many people named Jorge in my life. At least not that I admit online. Goody Guitars. I mean this kindly. If you're fixing a reverb section and you're blowing fuses and getting shocked in the process, this may not be something you need to do very often or ever again. I'm glad you got your amp working. But most reverb quick connect issues don't involve fuses or risk to your health. So, rubber gloves, man. Glove up. Thank you very much, Jorge. I appreciate that. Yeah, someday we'll see it. The thing, I know some of you guys, he's talking about art again, or blah, 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 or acoustic guitars, blah, blah, blah. It's, it's my low light, it's my low life. The, remember the first time I went to MoMA and I saw the persistence of memory. That's the one with the melting clocks for you Luddites out there. And all your life you see this on posters and everything. You think it's huge. It's about this big. The persistence of memory is about this big. You've got to really get close. And then you realize, all my life I thought Dolly was overrated. I'm like, oh, whatever, surreal, blah, blah, blah. And then you see it in real life, you're like, and then you research it. He painted that section of that painting with a single hair. Now, he wasn't using a brush. He's using a single hair. Knowing him as like his wife's lover's eyelash or something, but or something even worse, given his proximity to goats. But he was a phenomenal artist beyond the shtick, if you want to view it that way. And you don't appreciate that until you see it in life, because it's easy to do something that's very what's the word I'm looking for? Controversial, or kind of get publicity if it's giant. Silkscreen soup cans, Warhol's a genius. But then you see and so you kind of want to lump the persistence of memory in with that, or with the Duchamp urinal. Every museum I go in, I enjoy going to the Duchamp's room. But no, when you see the Dolly in person, it's like, wow, he was good. He was nuts, absolutely insane, but he was so damn good at what he did. Born in Edinburgh, but brought up in Glasgow. Well, Martin, I look forward to meeting you someday. I hope we can make that happen. One of the proudest moments as an Anglophile in my life, I shouldn't say Anglophile, Britophile, Scottyphile, Scotty don't. It was one night in Nashville at a bar. I was going up to visit a friend whose band was playing in town, and one of the other guys there was a drunk Glaswegian, very drunk, very Glaswegian, and I could understand about 90% of what he was saying, which was just a fucking miracle. I don't think people from Edinburgh could have understood what he was saying. Yeah, that's just the reality. There are batteries today that last longer, that charge faster, that give indications of remaining life. But man, I just got burned by the whole 9-volt game so much. I like simple, that telly. There's very little that can go wrong with that. And battery doors always break. I have never seen a boring Dick Cavett interview in my life. Dick Cavett, for those of you too young to know, a lot of the Dick Cavett interviews are on YouTube. Look him up. He was such an interesting interviewer. He was interesting in that he was not ever interesting, but he brought out everything that was interesting about his guests, about the people he interviewed, and it's a really dying skill. And even those of the people today who are quite good at it, Colbert, Jon Stewart, etc., they don't have the time, because even the best guys today will have someone on for 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Dick Cavett would have them on for an hour, 2 hours. And unlike the Charlie Roses, Dick Cavett, as far as we know, has never had any massive career-ending scandals, though. And he was also really cool in Beetlejuice. So speaking of Beetlejuice, we're going to take our next break early because I've got to go do something in one of the other rooms. And so we're going to take our second 7-minute intermission after reading this, that Dolly was the most arrogant human ever, but he really was as good as he thought he was. Well, so was Picasso. So that's the trouble when people are really damn good and they know it. And someone was mentioning, like, Jimmy, that's the opposite thing, where someone is really damn good and they don't know it. Jimi Hendrix seemingly had no idea how good he was. He just loved doing it. And that's what we should aspire to. But, you know, if you're as good as Dali or Picasso, a little bit of arrogance is understandable. Same for Miles Davis. On that note, see you guys in a little bit. And we're back. And I've learned to speak softly when we come back. Apparently, some people have been known to fall off ladders. If I come back and be like, hey, we're back. Let's see, can I open this goddamn thing? Is there a trick to it? Am I just not clever enough? It's possible. Yeah, there we go. All right. Got a 1/8 and a 1/4 diffusion I'm going to try out. We're going to have some camera fun in a little bit. First, I got to make these awful ASMR noises. Is that right? ASMR or AMSR? I always forget which one. Let's see. Yeah, the post-Woodstock stuff. Woodstock sounds a lot much better when described than I've seen the movie. I would not have wanted to be there. Hey, Fred. Well, of the Strat pickups, I've only tried the blondes. I've not tried any of the others, but the blondes sound fantastic. So if you like them, you are not alone. I bet they're a pretty consistently appreciated preference. Let's see. Check out Dali's Christ of St. John on the Cross in Covington Grove Art Gallery in Glasgow. I used to skip secondary school to go there as I learned more there. Yeah, you can learn a lot more from the museum than you can in most secondary schools. But yeah, all right, I will look at. I think I've seen Christ of St. John of the Cross. I think I've seen that in online. I'll have to look at that after this. I don't know what a JMD1 is, Richard. Sorry. Thank you, Goody. I've really been trying. Got a new camera here. Now, I have a newer brand 1/8 black mist filter on this to make it a little less crisp. And the newer filter was $17. And I got it because it was cheap. I wanted to see if I liked it. And I like it. I think I'm going to put it on the B lens. This is without it, so things are a little bit crisper. And I have here two Nano K series K&F. One's 1/4, one's an 1/8. So 1/8, I imagine the new 1/8 is better than the $17 1/8. But I'm going to try the 1/4. This is going to be the most effect. I'm curious to see what this looks like. Most other YouTube channels don't change the settings live, but I've been waiting for this thing for a few days. I'm impatient to check it out. Well, that's kind of nice. It's subtle. The main thing that these do is that they smooth the transition from where the light is to where the light falls off. But I think this might be a little bit much unless I'm going for a special effect. I think after this I'll change back. I'll change to the new 1/8 effect, so it's a little less than this. But man, the quality of the $30 filter is a lot nicer than the quality of the $17 filter. It is nice when occasionally in life we get what we pay for. I could stack them up and I could just be looking like I have Vaseline on the lens. Let's see. I have become fascinated by photography and videography and cinematography and lighting. And so this one crazy hobby of guitars and amps has led to an even crazier one. Hey, one of two. Recently built a SE EL84 amp with top boost preamp and now looking to build a push-pull EL84 Z-Rec Junior style amp. Let me find part 2. All right. I have a schematic for the 30-watt Z-Rec. Would a 15-watt version have exactly the same component values in the output section, minus 284, associated resistors, caps, etc.? Almost. You would change the cathode values, and basically the differences are just in the cathode of the phase inverter. Let's see if I have an example to give you. So that is the I don't know what Dr. Z did, but it's based on the Vox AC15 and AC30. You can look at the AC15 schematic and the AC30 schematic and see how the cathodes changes. Mostly the value of the bypass cap across the cathode and the phase inverter. Technically, it's not the cathode; it's the tail resistor, but there's a bypass cap across that. 47K in the box. It's 100. It's 50 ohms in one, and it's 200 ohms in the other. So play around with that. Hopefully that points you in the right direction. Yeah, John Collins totally smeared. I mean, this is minor in comparison. I'm completely sharp and focused. Let me take the filter off for comparison. I know that not all of you care, but I'll watch this back and be able to look at it, and then I'm going to read Solomon Hutchison's question. Some amps gain broad respective sales appreciation only to fade over time, like the THD univalve. From my perspective, has this more to do with cyclical consumer taste, marketing, or circuit design, or it is something that I've only been able to observe firsthand since the early days of the internet, starting with Usenet. Forums would discover things, and things would become the new desired it model. Some of them very good, some of them very bad. Like I remember in the Hayseed AC30 copy was the new darling of all the forums, and they're terrible. He built amps, just awful. Really bad terminal strips for grounds, and the terminals are all riveted to the thin aluminum chassis, and the terminal rivets break loose, and the grounds go crazy. I think in my lifetime of doing this, it's been more with the rise of the internet, starting with Usenet, and then like the Gear Page and all that, Harmony Central and all that. So some of it's trends and influencers. Some of it has been changes of stage volume, where a Princeton is suddenly a much more desirable amp today than it ever has been previously in its life, aside from certain genres. And I know that in the 80s, the rise of the notion of the vintage guitar and the vintage amp shaped tastes. Of course, at the same time, in the 80s, the rise of the figured cherry cabinet with the cane basket weave and graphic EQs was a trend that people were chasing for a long time. I think in any field of interest, there are fads, some of which are knowable and understandable, and some of which are just things are trendy, like brass nuts and bridges in the mid and late 70s. Now they're very frowned upon. They were the thing. I remember for a brief window, you were supposed to have a scalloped nut, or to have the nut have hollowed out sections in between where the strings go to maximize pressure underneath the strings. Some people did the same thing with bridges. You know, there are things which are valid. There are things which are of the moment. For instance, if you're trying to sound like pop music in 1980, your old Fender Twin may not cut it, but the JC100 is the thing to, not the JC100, sorry, JC120 is the thing. Now, today, we don't really want the JC120 so much as we want the old Twin. And there are things which are just FOMO, fear of missing out. So that's all the wisdom I can share. Just listed on Reverb is an AB763 from 1964 for $1,400. Seems like a reasonable price. Thoughts? Well, I don't know which AB763 that is. It could be a deluxe reverb. It could be a twin reverb, a pro reverb, a Bandmaster. I think Bandmaster had a different model number than AB763, but similar. It's almost the same amp aside from the reverb. My thoughts? That seems possibly too good to be true. So I'd look at whether the transformers are original, whether it's been butchered, etc. It's possible that you have found the deal of the decade. I think that is a price which is 10 to 15 years out of time. Hey, sent to me, Tommy, right? I don't want to bust out your last name, so you didn't share it in the last stream. starting to read Merlin's Designing Valve Preamps. That's great. Wish you'd read this years ago. Thanks for that chapter on grounding. It got you started. Very cool. Glad to help. And I always appreciate you. Hey, man, you give so many super chats. I really appreciate you. I just want you to know it is appreciated, very much appreciated, but it is not necessary. Top boost and Z-Rec preamps is nearly the same. Well, the preamps I know are similar. The Z-Rec adds in the I believe he adds in the F86 thing, but the output section, I don't know what Dr. Z did in that in comparison to the AC30 or AC15. I suspect it's very, very similar, maybe some different filtering, given that Brad's studio stuff is all the vintage JMI, then he has the Dr. Z's for live use. Hey, Nusumla. The trim on my 72 Pro Reverb kicks in somewhat late the first time. After it once ran, no more an issue, plus not ticking, sounds rather like not very loud high frequency oscillation. Okay, ideas. Imagine that the kick starting is probably a failing cathode bypass cap. It's possibly that in V5A. It could also be V5B, it could be both. Change them both anyway, because it's easy to change those out. After that, high frequency oscillation would probably be a dirt in the board, conductivity in the fiber board, and I've shown how to clean that with isopropyl and heat and some paper towels. It just janitorial services more than almost anything else. I'm glad it's not ticking for you. It could also be that the wires going to V5 or the wires going to and from the speed and intensity pots are too close to other wires. So make sure that the wires going to V5 are dressed away from the wires going to V4 and the wires going to V6. Move the V5 wires around with a wooden chopstick or plastic chopstick while the amp is on, being careful and being safe, and see if there's a magical position where the noise goes away. And then repeat this. If you don't have any improvement there, make sure you do the same thing with the wire that's going to the RCA jack on the back. And if you don't have an improvement there, do the same thing, playing around with the wires going to and from the speed and intensity pots. You'll probably track it down. Hey, sent to me, what amp kit company do I recommend for a 2204 50 watt Marshall, no effects loop? Thanks. I don't keep up with the amp kits, but since you gave me a super chat, let me look it up and see. I imagine that I'm going to tell you Mojotone, but let me see what their offering is. Amps, British amplifiers. Is that the amp kits? All right. And you said specifically 2204. All right. British style 50 watt guitar tube amp kit. All right. Here's the British style 800 2204 guitar amp, tube amp kit. Let's look at this together. So just one second. Let's see. And I want to share the screen. There we go. All right. I don't have any embarrassing sub-tabs open. Okay. Yeah, I've been looking at Pyres for that 74 super bass, and the prices are just insane. That's for 2 resistors, and that's 10 for 140, so only $14 each. No, thank you. I need to talk to the owner about that. All right, we've got the Mojotone kit has got the Haybor iron. It's got a good quality board. It's blue. I don't like the blue, but that makes no difference. They've really improved their instructions of late. I think these are the new JJ caps they're offering. I don't recall. And they make really great chassis and faceplates, and they have great cabinets. Let me see if there's anything in here. I'm not signed in, so you're not seeing my secret squirrel prices. Let's see what components they're using here. All right, they're using their Mojotone Dijons, which makes sense that they have them made. The Dijons are really good sounding caps. They're a fine choice. They are physically very large in comparison to the old mustards in comparison to the Vichy MKT 13s I prefer. Using some alpha pots. Note on these alpha pots, these are great pots. I use them all the time. They're not, if there's, I don't know if their instruction calls for a bus wire across the back of the pots. It's difficult to do that on these alpha pots. They don't have the back of them is not tinned. You have to remove the coating. So I would be very cautious if they say to do a bus wire. I wouldn't do a bus wire. See my other videos on that. And if you need to make a ground connection to the shell of one of these alphas, you need to use a Dremel or some other tool to rough up and remove the outside coating, and then clean it very thoroughly. And then you can get a little spot where you can get solder to, you can tin it and get solder to stick. Other than that, everything here looks pretty good. The main reason I would go with these is that the individual components from filter caps to even the board, or the choice of little components can be changed. So Mojotone, I need to find out who's making these caps from Mojotone. I should call them and find out. If they don't work, they're fairly easy to change back out for some F&Ts, then maybe we'll be fine. The main thing is that they have Haybor. Mojotone is the distributor for Haybor, and Haybor is one of the better sets of iron you can get for a Marshall build these days. Now that Marin's out of the game apparently, and Patrick's no longer at Mercury, which makes Mercury much more difficult to justify. So I would say Mojotone, but it's always going to come down to the skill of the builder. And I believe you are local to me, sent to me. So if you need some assistance, reach out. Tremolux Blackface. For whatever reason, the Tremolux and the Bandmaster aren't as valuable to most players as the reverb amps. Tremolux doesn't have reverb, Bandmaster doesn't have reverb, so they're just not as desired. But they're fantastic sounding amps. So $1,400 seems a little bit low, but not tremendously low. But if it was, if you can't do a gig with a Tremolux and a reverb pedal, you weren't gonna do that gig anyway. I think it's good at guitars, and please don't electrocute yourself anymore. Hey, Lucas Donald, thanks for joining us early in the morning in Wellington. Hey, Endless Revolt is working on an old Univox amp. It sends wildly out of datasheet voltages, 700 plus, to the plates of a pair of 6L6 GCs. The original GE tubes were with the amp. Should I tame the voltages? Yeah, 700 volts is too much for 6L6s. A lot. You could play around with other tube types, but 700 volts is just a punishment. And you want to watch the voltage on the data sheet pretty closely. You can exceed the plate, but much more so than you can exceed the screen. But you need to first find out why your voltages are so much higher. Are they too high for the, have you found a schematic for the amp? Are they way higher than indicated by the schematic? Or is this, maybe the GEs aren't original? I don't know. But I would be very cautious of 700 volts on the plates of 6L6s, but you would certainly want to be extremely cautious, making sure that screens don't approach over 450. Well, I would keep them around 450 if possible. All right, well, lots of people have bus wire designs. They're terrible. You don't need to. I've shown Marshall builds on my channel where every wire is individually run as to grounds on the chassis, and there are lots of ways to do it. But a bus wire, A, is a bad way to do it, and I've shown that multiple times. B, with those alpha pots, it's a very difficult way to do it well. So Mojotone is out of stock, so other than Mojotone, should have mentioned that before. I don't know. Let me look one other place. The question is the transformers. The Mojotone, if they're in stock, they're using Haybores. I want to see. I'm gonna check CE distribution. I'm gonna check StuMac and see what transformers they're using. Electronics, kits and projects. I'm at StuMac right now. I'll let you guys tag along. All right, so amp kits. They got Brit 45. Are they got any others? Apparently that's all that StuMac has. All right, I'm gonna go to C distribution, which you guys can't follow along with. I'll do it as if I were you guys. Tubesandmore.com. I've got to spell it right. This is the public version of the same business. All right, amp kits, amplifier kits. Let's see. And they don't have any. So I do not have a Marshall kit that I would recommend. I'm not a personal fan of the Stereotone. So I would say wait for the Mojotone. Wait till they're in stock. There are a lot of good amps out there, but if you're going to do a kit, and hey, if you just want to build a kit amp, maybe you'd be happy with some of the other things that Mojotone has. But really, it comes down to the iron, and Mojotone's got the good stuff. Hey, DMC 9300. Look at the. I've got some videos on Marshall ground schemes and Marshalls. Look for those. They will show you the way. It is the way I have spoken. And the stock needs help. Hey, Greenballs effects. All right, AC30, 8 ohms, 80 ohms rather, with 250. That would I would usually that's 50 ohms, but it could be as high as 80 ohms. AC15 usually 120 ohms, 130 ohms is as high as you want it to be, and 50 microfarad. Usually an AC15's got 100 microfarad, and you want to have 25. I usually use a 63 volt cap there just because I stock them, and it's fine. So it looks like on the Z-Rack they're just copying the Vox. So if you're doing the AC15 version of it, expect to do between 100 and 140 ohms on the cathode tail resistor, and use try a 47 and 100 microfarad cap. See what you like the sound of, and 63 microfarad is a common value, but you can use a 25 volt. But I prefer the 63 just to. I stock them. They cost the same or like pennies more than the 25 volt, and you have more range of use. You can also use them in bias supplies typically. Yeah, so the StuMac J1045 came with Haybore transformers. I'm pretty sure that the StuMac kits are a partnership with Mojotone, but I have not confirmed that. But since Mojotone is the official exclusive distributor for Haybore, if you're not OEM, that makes sense that StuMac is using Mojotone kits and just paying for the StuMac branding. Now, StuMac offers some great stuff, but you can also overpay, and then the StuMac shipping can be its own kind of tax. I think Headfirst is branching out and using a different brand for the kits and boards and stuff, but I don't think he sells full kits. I think he just sells PCBs, because supplying transformers from Australia to the North American market, it's not going to be a viable thing for him to do. He'd probably have to buy U.S.-made transformers and have them shipped to Australia to ship them back. It's just not going to be the thing. But the Mojotone of the kits I'm familiar with would be the way to go. Hey, the Jameson. Hope you're getting some of this nice, cool weather in Nashville that we're having here in Memphis. Well, Martin, thanks for taking the time to be here. Otherwise, I would just be one more idiot talking to a little black box in front of him. I may still be that, but at least I have company. So thanks for being that company. All right, well, endless revolt, you need to figure out how to knock down that wall voltage. Does it have a solid state rectifier or a tube rectifier? I don't know which model it is, but pop that in there. I'll see if I can give you some ideas. Hey, Matt, my recent comments on Gibson Explorers were spot on. I love Explorers. I have two. I'm looking for a third. They're comfortable to be sitting or standing, but man, are they hassle to haul around. Yeah, I mean, if you're driving a big old SUV or pickup truck like so many Americans, it's sure, whatever, man. I've got a Volkswagen Golf, and Explorer is a lot of space. And if you're gigging in a major city and you're taking a taxi, the Explorer is not your friend. But they are really cool looking. Hey, Richard, I appreciate that very much. I'm glad to have been of help. Hey, CG Productions. Well, I assume there's going to be a follow-up. Hey, again, DMC 9300. Where should a Marshall Vintage amp has its presence pot cap grounded relative to the modified bus bar proposed? Well, what I do is I usually put either I solder it to the shell of the pot, or I'll put a ground lug to the chassis right beneath it, and I have the presence pot and the caps going to that ground. I want to have the mids pot going there as well, and if possible, the phase inverter ground to that same point, because all this is within the negative feedback loop. The presence pot, the tone stack, the phase inverter, and I will have the screen and phase inverter filter nodes grounded to that same point whenever possible, because everything there from screen to phase inverter nodes and all the grounding point of the phase inverter is through the presence circuit, and then the tone stack is after coupling cap, so it needs to go to the ground of the phase inverter, all that going to one point on the chassis whenever possible. Hope that makes sense. Univox 1236. Let me look at that real quick. Let's see. Okay, Pro S amplifiers has always got the good stuff. Let's call this up and look at the schematic together. Okay, and can you guys see the mouse as I move the mouse? I can't see it, but I think I'm watching my videos back. You can. All right, so what are they doing here? All right. All right, that's a kind of a funky way to do it. I'm thinking, trying to think, because it's a funky circuit. So standby is just switching off one of the secondaries there on the brown wire. I assume pink is a tap. What is the pink a tap to? Anyway, they're doing a voltage doubler here. That's complicated. Voltage doublers are tricky. Is this pink wire being used elsewhere in the amp? because that pink wire is not drawn as a center tap, it's drawn as another tap. But say that the pink wire is a tap that's lower than the red tap. If you were to move the wire from red to pink, it's possible that the whole thing just comes down by X percentage. I don't know without having it in front of me. That's what I would look at, though, because you've got the brown, which is one reference to this voltage divider, the red, which seems to be is the standard high voltage that's being used. I'm gesturing to the camera, which you cannot see. I need to figure out how to do the picture-in-picture thing for this. I would suspect that if that pink tap is not being used, and say that pink tap is, say red to brown is 550 volts, but pink to brown is only 500 volts or 450 volts, you might be able to just move the red and pink and get that voltage drop. But confirm that with it disconnected from everything else, so disconnect the red and the pink and the brown from whatever they're connected to, and measure the secondary from brown to red and brown to pink. And that would be might be a way to get a free offset, but I don't know what it is because it doesn't say on the spec. Let me minimize this one, the big white thing behind. Let's see. Hey, 74 Canal, the French Alps. Ah, beautiful. What would be my procedure to troubleshoot an amp blowing HT fuse without any tubes in? Well, the number one thing is I would want to make sure that the capacitors, filter caps, everything from the screen down through the phase inverter and the preamp are good. Now, the second thing is how the HT fuse is implemented. Is HT fuse implemented across a some amps will have the center tap of the HT secondary going through a fuse, and they call that the HT fuse. Other amps will put the HT fuse after the choke and before the screen. Some amps will do it after the rectifier tube and before the choke, and some amps will do it after the rectification but before the reservoir cap. Okay, so 7 HT fuses across center tap to ground. Okay, that's good to know. That means that it is not necessarily a problem with anything downstream, but as soon as current is being drawn by those secondaries, it's blowing a fuse. So we have no tubes. I would disconnect the first thing I would do is I would disconnect the HT secondaries from the rectifier. I don't know whether is it a valve rectifier or is it a solid state? If it's solid state, I would disconnect the wires. If it's a valve amp, I would just pull the valve out and then see if the fuse blows with nothing connected to the HT. If nothing, solid state. So disconnect it from the diodes. Disconnect each HT wire from the diodes, and do that. And if it doesn't blow a fuse and you measure 330, 660 or 450, whatever the voltage is across that, it's not blowing fuses. But then as soon as then the next thing is to is it a 50 watt or 100 watt? Sorry, I know I'm sounding like I'm live without a net because I am. Breakfast Buddy 5, but Music Man's kill 6L6s all the time. I'll get to your question in a second, CG Productions. 74 Canal, it's only 18 watt. Okay, cool. All right, so here's what you do. Disconnect the HT wires from the existing rectifier. Power the amp on with a fuse in place. See if it doesn't blow the fuse, make sure you have good voltage. Then take two 1N4007s and up in the air from each HT wire, 1 in 4007 tying together, just making the simplest rectifier, then measuring the DC on the other side of the diodes. If that's all working, then temp in one filter cap from that point to ground. It can be anything 500 volts, 22 microfarad, 50 microfarad, whatever you got. And if that's stable, then it's probably not a problem in the transformer. But if that falls apart, just having that little amount of current being drawn, you have trouble with your secondary winding, most likely, of your power transformer. Like Lucas Donald says, make sure you're using slow blow fuses, not fast blow fuses. Otherwise, you can have a false failure. Wes really wants to do a pork butt, and he cannot lie. All right, CG Productions, pros and or cons of biasing a vintage Fender blackface amp using a brown box to set bias with existing wall voltage or reduced voltage to my preferred voltage 115. Well, if you're always going to use the brown box and you're going to be consistent and you're going to verify that the brown box is actually putting out, say, 110 to 117, somewhere in that range, bias with the brown box. You should always bias for the normal voltage you're expecting to use the amp at, with an eye towards what happens if it goes higher. So if you were to bias your amp with the brown box at 115 volts, but you bias the amp at 70%, and then you forget and don't use the brown box and the wall voltage is 125, you can damage your tubes. So you got to bear these things in mind, and it's all these balancings you got to keep track of. But if you're using the amp consistently at 115 volts, bias the amp at 115 volts. Endless Revolt, good luck. I've not had a Univox in over a decade, so I am far from the Univox guy. It's possible that the schematic is lying also. You may, and you can play around with, see if the 6L6s can survive that, or you can try some higher voltage tubes, some KT77s or something. That's the trouble with these old amps. There's just not a lot of information on the companies that went out of business. Sorry. Thank you very much. New to my video, so I haven't come explanation. For shielded input cables, do I only connect the shield at the input jack side? It's called a telescoped ground. And the reason you do that is within the circuit, there's already a path in the amp design from the input ground to ground in the circuit. So you don't want to replicate and have it tied to the chassis there and tied to the chassis here, or tied to the chassis there and tied to the circuit board here. That's already there. So you don't want to have ground at both ends of that shielded wire. You want to have ground connected only at one end. That's why we call it a telescoped ground, because it's going out, but it's only tied at one point. Usually, you want to have that at the side of lowest impedance, which is usually ground. In theory, you would always want to have that ground at the receiving end of wherever the current is flowing. For those of you who are electricians, current doesn't flow. I'm using it in the vernacular sense. So if you're going from the input jack to pin 2 of V1, in theory, you would have the ground connected as close to that point of pin 1 as possible. But unless you have terminal strips or something there, it's not really feasible to do that. So you say, well, I can't do the theoretical best, I'll do the next best. Because I have a ground right there at the input jack, I'll use my shield, I'll tie my shielding, the ground of the cable is just shielding here. It's not passing negative signal there. So even though it's better to have the ground be made at the receiving point, you make it at the origin point for most things like that. Same for if you're running from the wiper of a volume pot to the grid of a tube. There's not a good place to put ground right by the tube unless you add stuff, but there's already ground at the volume pot. So there are places where you kind of fudge the ideal, but it's still much better than not having shielding. And usually you can't tell any difference in the real world between the ideal and the good enough. Now, when it comes to grounding of a device in comparison to the outside world, that's when it gets crucial, because if you are grounding the wrong way, you can have all the noise coming in the input jack, and it doesn't get all the RF doesn't get dumped to chassis till later in the circuit. I'm digressing, but in terms of answering your question, it's fine and more than fine to ground conveniently. You'll see some amps as you do this that use B plus for the shield instead of the ground, because it is also low impedance, and sometimes can be a better shield than ground, or it can have other qualities that you want. It can offer some free capacitance, high-end roll-off for a high-gain thing. But it is an inherently dangerous thing to be using B plus as shield, especially if it's anywhere near the input jack, where if something were to go wrong, you'd have 300 volts on your guitar. So I would say don't do B plus for shielding unless you are very, very confident that you know all the variables. And in fact, I would say you have to know that you know the variables. You cannot be confident, because people get confident in themselves all the time. I'm confident that I'll look good on the beach. I'd be wrong, but I'm confident of it. So when it comes to things that can kill people, err on the side of I don't know what I'm doing, I'm just going to do ground. Hopefully that answers the question. What parameters do I have for the shielded cable aside from low capacitance? I don't worry about the capacitance that much, because you're only running a foot or so. A foot or so of shielded cable with a telescoped shield rather than full ground is not going to have much capacitance. So what you want to have, in fact, you can have two low capacitance. A cable which has really low capacitance in a high impedance setup, like you'd find at the input grid of a tube, can be very noisy. You can have microphonics if it's too low capacitance. A little bit of capacitance can be your friend. So I use stuff which is not extraordinarily low capacitance. I'm looking for something which is flexible without being floppy. And I want a connector that's at least 24 gauge, preferably 22 gauge at minimum, because I don't want it to be like 3 hairs width amount of wire holding it, because then it'll break. I want the conductor to be thick enough that it actually can have some mechanical strength to it, and I also want to make sure that I'm offering the mechanical support. Like if I'm at all concerned about it, I'll go as far as put a little bit of Teflon down so that the last 2 inches of wire are coupled to the cabinet, chassis. So there's not I don't have a foot of cable playing jump rope on there. I've got the last 2 inches that aren't going to move. So stress. You don't want a joint that's going to stress. You don't want something so thick that it's hard to run. And you don't want a shielding material that's a bitch to work with. Some shield wires have shielding that just makes you want to tear your hair out. So convenient, a perfect blend of convenience and performance. And I know that sounds nebulous, but watch what I just said back like 3 times. It'll begin to make sense. And you can just use Mogami. The stuff sold for the Mogami stuff sold for lavalier mics is usually just fine. And they've got one the same size that's only 2 conductor instead of 2 conductor. It's only 1 conductor with a shield versus 2 conductor with shield, which is for a balance lav mic. Those are great, but the trouble is the conductors can be very, very thin. So you got to be very careful how you support them mechanically. Okay. YouTube says cannot open this page. That's weird. Did my chat go away? Says it's still happening. Okay, sorry. The YouTube chat window suddenly said can't open this page on both of them. Like it lost its connection, but says it's fine. Sorry, just making sure. I didn't want to be like and blah 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 and blah 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 blah. Watch it back and realize I've been talking to no one. So sorry about that. I'm sure I made plenty of dumb faces. Oh, what's going on? I watch these things back and I'm like, keep your mouth shut, sit up straight, posture. Let's see. I scrolled down just to make sure I wasn't missing anything. Let's see. Man, I want to just talk about smoking, but let me get through. I mean, smoking meat, that is. But let me get through any other amp questions before we wrap this up. Hey, Chris here. Chris has been lucky enough to have on the bench 16 of the very first guitar amps ever made from the 30s for an amazing collector for a documentary. It's amazing how far we've come since then. Yeah, I've been thinking about doing a history. You know, Keith at 5 Watt does brief history of this guitar, brief history of this amp, brief history of this. I thought about doing a not brief history of the guitar amp in terms of where we started from, which are basically radios that you could also plug in something into and have it amplify. And those early 30s ones started off basically just as radios that could have an external source connected, which would be a high input impedance. And while they were designing these things to be clean and loud for the day, you know, make something about as loud as a Stromberg, because the pickups that they had were so terrible and the impedances varied so much, they were using some crazy high gain Pinto designs in the 30s and 40s. You plug a Telecaster into it, let alone a Les Paul, and it's just screaming overdrive. That 36 EH150 I have on the channel, or maybe it's 39, I don't recall. So many happy accidents, but yeah, Chris, you were very lucky. I'd love to know more about that stuff. Hey, Wallpaper Music, I think you might be a little bit behind in the chat. Hey, Wes. Wes has got the V1A's grid shielded in the 2203. Should also shield V1B's grid to the master volume pot as well. I do that shielding on the grid to the master volume, from the master volume pot. Wait, V1B's grid to the master volume. 2203, the master volume should feed the input of the phase inverter. You mean the volume pot, not the master volume pot? The V1, it gets confusing because in the traditional 2203, the input jack goes to V1B and the output wiper of the volume pot goes to V1A. But yes, I do shield that wire from the volume pot. I also add usually a 10K resistor right at the grid, and I will often put a 10 to 100 picofarad cap from plate to cathode on whichever triode is being used for the actual high gain, which is B in the traditional Marshall, but maybe A in yours. Shh, don't tell anyone that's a secret. You've got to watch almost 2 hours of one of these streams to get that information. But notice I say I'm putting the Snubber cap from plate to cathode, not from grid to cathode. A, grid to cathode rolls off a lot more highs. B, it varies as you change your volume pot then. Whereas if you're doing from the plate to cathode, you can roll your volume pot back and the tonal characteristic doesn't change. If Dave were watching this, he'd be like, and yeah, but it's not that widely known apparently. Wes, if you want some other pointers, I'll be glad to give you as much of an asset and a friend you've been to me over the past couple of years on the channel. I'll be glad to give you a 2203, 2204 a consult over the phone. Any questions you got, man? So the StewMac kit also has Mojotone can caps. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that the StewMac branded I think it's just a way for Mojotone to be exposed to some of StewMac's customers and for StewMac to be exposed to some of Mojotone's customers. I think they're probably both just expanding their customer base a little bit, and it means that StewMac gets to sell amp kits because there are people who would want to buy an amp kit who would never know to go to Mojotone, but they go to StewMac, oh, there's an amp kit. So Mojotone makes some money off that, StewMac makes some money on that, and vice versa. Hey, Greg Drona, I've not had a chance, or I've actually had chances. I just have not had the memory space. I forgot. I will look into wedge locking washers after this. Sorry. And y'all all smoking pots. Yeah, you think your head's full of wiring diagrams? Ah, man. I fall asleep at night sometimes thinking about this shit. Anyway, we're about to wrap this up. So, what was I going to say? I'm going to keep it going for another 9 minutes or so, just in case anyone got here late and has questions that they have to have answered. And I'm going to open some of these goodies I've been waiting for. Oh boy, some brown paper. The brown paper is here. The brown paper is here. Ooh. Ah. See if I can make this thing work. Okay, that goes that way. All right. If I can, it's this one. Okay, that's that. That's that. How do I make this thing go? This is a battery plate for the camera. In theory, it is, but it's not wanting to do the thing. Does Barry Manilow know you rate his wardrobe? Unlikely, sir. It's in Johnson's underwear. Oh, it just took more force than I expected. I'm always cautious about just forcing something because I've broken too many things. I just built an 5F6A kit for Mojotone. It came with an extremely conductive board. That's odd. I mean, it's authentic. Fender's the boards tend to get conductive, but it should not have been conductive as it came to you. That's weird. How conductive is conductive? What did you measure on it? Maybe it got humid. I'm not giving Mojotone a blanket excuse because anything can happen, but that's the trouble with fiberboard. The more authentic that Fender replication is, the more things like that can happen because it's essentially just cardboard that's waiting for its opportunity to get moisture in it, and moisture, because it is made of water, is conductive. Thanks, Scott. I appreciate that. I really appreciate that. You know, one of the things to keep in mind, I try to keep it in mind, is that when I talk about my years of experience, I'm actually not that old. I'm only 54. I know I look at the hair, but there are people who do this, who've been doing this twice and 3 times as long as I have. The people who have been doing this much longer than I have, who really, really know what they're doing, tend not to be on YouTube or to be that social media or otherwise. And so in comparison to some of you whippersnappers out there, I'm an old, wizened person, but I know that my decades of experience I'm still on the path, you know. I'm getting there. One day I hope to get good at this shit, but it's very easy to, how did I get so big all of a sudden? What happened? What happened? That's weird. That's very strange. Anyway, I don't consider myself this master. Someday I'll get there. So it's very easy for me to see that and get inflated sense of self, and I don't want to do that. Why am I so big? Did it kick in a crop? That's weird. I'll figure that out afterwards. Yeah, I am not Yoda. I don't even like snakes stew. Barry is all sequence these days. Yeah, it was so funny watching them back in the 70s. All the women, they still are at his concerts, the women who are just nuts for Barry Manilow. And I'm like, ladies, funny about that. All right, so here's one of the cool, for any camera people out there, this is one of the coolest things I found. It's by this awfully named company named Nicey Rig. I'm gonna take Scott's very nice message down for just a second, and we'll get back to your stuff as well. So Nicey Rig, very stupid, but what it is this is the battery clamp that goes on the back of the camera, and it's got a little Arca Swiss plate there to grab onto the cage, so I can attach. If I unscrew these and move these around, that'll go on to here, right? Because usually when you have an Arca Swiss plate, you put the camera down, it just tilts over on the lens. With this, once it's all put together, I set it down. It's on these 4 legs when I set it down. Here's another Arca Swiss underneath here. Attaches, if I put this up on the tripod, it sits on the tripod. But if I want to set this down on a table, because I'm doing handheld, that's weird. Earlier in the stream, I would have been able to show you that, but suddenly, oh, I see what's happening. Okay, the camera's not the issue. The issue is when the software glitched. Just one second. Doop-a-doop-a-doo. Window. Camera effects. It zoomed on me. Aha. Okay, I'm not insane. I never pushed that. It just zoomed. I must have been reading question anyway. So now this will sit down on a table, and I can put the camera down and it won't go. So I like gadgets. Any of you guys just like gadgets? And you don't have to be interested in cameras to appreciate gadgets. Let's see some amp questions before I go be playing gadgets. I should be given an IEEE award. I can't even spell that award, let alone deserve it, but thank you. Hey, Scott. Thinking of pulling the trigger on an Overkill 68 dual Showman reverb and Impractical. What should I be on the lookout for? Transition year, unknown provenance. Well, 68 is a transition year cosmetically. 68s electronically are the same as the 66 by and large. Sometimes the wire color change in 68. The same thing you'd look at in a 66. Are the transformers original? Has anything ever been on fire? Are any of the grounds all messed up? Is there anything that looks off? Just know that a dual Showman reverb is extremely impractical, extremely loud, extremely heavy, and extremely large. But if you know all those things and you still want one, I can't stop you. That's the madness of all this stuff. Yeah, David Masters is lame. Devin Masters is lame. Are you Devin Masters or are you in constant criticism of poor Devin. Oh yeah, I mean, Louisiana is one of Southern Louisiana and Houston are the only places that make me feel better about living in Memphis. Yeah. And as a 5F6A, so that's a tricky one to replace with a fiberglass board. If it makes you feel any better, if you had a real 5F6A bassman there, it would be just as bad. It's just, Fender was designed in a much more arid environment, you know, starting in Fullerton, and then they moved to Scottsdale. And I don't think that Leo Fender knew that such a place existed as, say, Homa. Don't wax it. Don't wax it. Wax prevents water from getting in initially, but over time the wax itself becomes conductive, and then it's a horrible mess to get out. I know what the IEEE is. I'm just trying to make fun of myself. The best thing you can do is just soak the board with isopropyl alcohol and then use a heat gun to dry it all out, and then let the amp, after it's dried out enough that it's safe to power back up on, run the amp for a few hours, and it'll take a while, but all the stray voltages should go away, because the isopropyl will soak into the board, and because water is heavier than isopropyl, the isopropyl forces the water out of the board. Most of the water content will leave the board at that point, and the isopropyl will evaporate out. And for that, you want to get as pure the isopropyl as you can find. For general cleaning, I use 91%. But if you really need to do deep soaking like that, the stuff which doesn't have hardly any water at all is the right choice, anhydrous. Yeah, it will eventually come back. That's what happens when you have a fiberboard amp in the South. Mike Campbell won't clean his fingerboard. I won't clean Tom Campbell's fingerboard either. Have you seen Tom Campbell? Ugh. Yeah, it's a little landing pad. When the camera's on here, I'd show you the camera on here, except then you wouldn't be able to see it because the camera's up there right now. I traded South LA Louisiana weather for Southern Arizona a few years back. My apps start rusting. Yay. Yeah, but your skin's going to dry out and you're going to turn into a zombie. My mother-in-law and father, and one of my fathers-in-law, actually one of my mothers-in-law, one of my fathers-in-law, Nikki's parents are divorced, so her mom and stepdad live outside Phoenix. We go and visit. I haven't been in a year or two, but there's no water at all. And it's hotter here, even though temperature-wise it's hotter in Phoenix than it is Memphis. With the humidity, it is physically hotter and more miserable here. But you just get so dry. I have to use the lotion. I have to moisturize, and I'm just not the kind of person who does that normally. Anyway, we are just over 2 hours. Thank you all for being here. It means a lot to me, and I need to remember which button I'm meant to push. And I'll try not to do any crazy random zooms. I'm not sure what happened, but it sure did, with the zooming and then the Chrome semi-crashing and all that. Anyway, thank you all for being here. For those of you who are enjoying this brief bit of cool weather that I'm experiencing, long may we continue. For those of you who are still getting the brutal stuff, and there's more brutal stuff coming, drink lots of water and hug your mama.